Well, we often hear about, the different branches of government kind of butting heads. But this week, man, this week brought one into the spotlight. We're going to take a deep dive into some major legal stuff going on with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. That's the one headed up by Elon Musk. And it looks like they've run into a bit of a wall, legally speaking.
Yeah, you're not kidding. We're looking at a pretty big ruling that just came down from a U.S. federal judge, and it's not looking good for DOGE and Elon Musk. The main thing here, the thing that makes this whole thing so important, is that the judge thinks they probably, broke the Constitution. And it all has to do with their actions around the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAI.
All right, USAID. And to really get into the weeds on this one, we're going off a transcript from a YouTube video, one of those legal breakdown things, by the Ring of Fire. The title's pretty dramatic. DOGE suffers major court loss for violating Constitution. Now, the video mentions a few other, issues DOGE has been dealing with lately. There's that whole thing about some maybe misleading information about savings and some questions about Amy Gleason and her, leadership role. But the big deal here, the thing that really jumps out, is this whole constitutional violation thing with USA.
Definitely. What the judge is saying is that DOGE, with Elon Musk at the helm, they basically went too far when it came to dealing with USA. And this isn't just some small, whoopsie. This gets to the heart of how power is supposed to work in our government, how it's all divided up.
Yeah, no kidding. And the judge didn't mince words either. I'm looking at the ruling right here. And they said, and this is a direct quote, "You had no authority to go into the USAID office department, fire these people, stop their payments, strip them of their security clearances, and of course stop the payments from USAID." And just so everyone's clear, I think they're talking about the different offices and departments within USAID there with that USAID office department bit. Yeah. Pretty strong words from the court, huh?
Oh, yeah. And the reasoning behind it all goes back to that system of checks and balances we have. That's what they call the separation of powers. So USA, it was created by Congress, right? It was an act of Congress, which means if you're going to do something big to change it, like get rid of a bunch of staff or stop its funding, you need Congress to sign off on it. The executive branch, that's where DOGE falls. They can't just decide to do that on their own.
And the judge really hammered that home, too. Here's another important part of the ruling. They said, the court finds the defendant's actions taken to shut down USAID on an accelerated basis, including its apparent decision to permanently close USA headquarters without the approval of a duly appointed USA officer, likely violated the Constitution in multiple ways, and that these actions harm not only plaintiffs, but also the public interest because they deprive the public's elected representatives in Congress of their constitutional authority to decide whether, when, and how to close down an agency created by Congress. Wow. That part about Congress getting cut out of the decision-making, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, no question. It's all about the separation of powers, right? That idea that the government's powers are split up. You've got the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, and they each have their own jobs and can, keep each other in check. So Congress, they make the laws and decide how the money gets spent. The executive branch puts those laws into action, but they can't just go rogue and dismantle or defund agencies whenever they feel like it. Congress has to be involved. And, this whole thing was a pretty serious issue for the judge. They wrote a 68-page order on it.
68 pages. That's a deep dive for sure. And the judge didn't just issue a statement. They took action, right? There was a personal injunction.
Yeah, that's right. It's called a preliminary injunction. It's like a temporary order. So basically the judge is saying, hold up, Musk and DOGE, you need to get in line within 7 days. This injunction, it says they can't share personal information about people who work for USAID, and they can't do anything else to try and shut the agency down. And the interesting thing here is the Ring of Fire video, they pointed out that trying to get rid of USAID was one of the first things DOGE did.
Oh, wow. So this ruling could have some pretty big consequences then. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Amy Gleason and her leadership at DOGE, but the judge really zeroed in on Elon Musk specifically. What's the deal with that?
The interesting thing here is how clearly the judge pointed to Musk's involvement. The ruling actually says the record of his activities to date establishes that his role has been and will continue to be as the leader of DOGE, with the same duties and degree of continuity as if he was formally in that position. Basically, the judge is saying that Musk was the one calling the shots on this whole USA thing, regardless of, what official title someone might have had at any given time. They saw through any attempts to shift the blame,
So this wasn't just some, low-level bureaucratic decision. The court is pointing the finger directly at the top dog at DOGE. And this whole situation The executive branch may be overreaching when it comes to an agency created and funded by Congress. It reminded our source of something else, the first impeachment of Donald Trump. What's the connection there?
That's a good point. The first time Trump was impeached, it was all about claims that he'd withheld military aid that was supposed to go to Ukraine. And that aid had already been approved by Congress.
And the big argument during the impeachment was that the president can't just decide not to spend money that Congress has already allocated, right?
Exactly. It's the same basic principle at play in both of these situations. The executive branch, whether it's the president himself or some organization like DOGE that falls under the executive branch, they can't just ignore or undo decisions made by Congress about creating and funding government stuff. Congress had said, okay, we're giving aid to Ukraine. Just like they said, okay, we're creating USA and giving it money. And when the executive branch tries to go against that, well, it raises some serious questions about, the separation of powers and all that.
Yeah, it makes you realize just how important that balance of power is in our system. Congress sets the policies, they hold the purse strings, and the executive branch is supposed to put those policies into action. This ruling is kind of like drawing a line in the sand, But hold on, the Ring of Fire video did mention that this is just a temporary injunction, not a final decision. So what does that mean?
That's an important detail. A preliminary injunction, it's something the court does to prevent, further harm while the case is still going on. But the thing is, the way the judge wrote their reasoning in this ruling, it's a pretty good indicator of how they'll probably rule in the end. The person in the YouTube video, they even said that the way the judge worded it kind of tells us DOGE ain't going to win this, and that it'd be very difficult for any appellate court to undo what the judge's final ruling will eventually be.
So it's not over yet, but it's not looking great for DOGE and Elon Musk so far.
No, the judge did a very thorough analysis, and that 68-page order, it sets a precedent that would be pretty hard to overturn on appeal.
All right, so let's wrap this up and give everyone the TLDR version. The main takeaway from this deep dive is that we have a U.S. federal judge who has issued a pretty big injunction against the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, run by, of course, Elon Musk. The court found that their actions, the stuff they did to try and change or shut down USI without getting the okay from Congress, it probably violated the Constitution. And this whole situation is very similar to the constitutional issues that were at the center of a previous impeachment, the one involving a certain former president. It all boils down to the separation of powers in our government, that really important principle.
And that brings us to something important for all of you listening to think about. Think about how power is balanced between the executive and legislative branches. How does this ruling shed light on the, back and forth and debates we always have about that balance, especially when it comes to agencies that were created and funded by the people we elect to Congress? What does it mean for the separation of powers when the executive branch tries to, sidestep the legislative branch's authority? This case really makes you think about the foundation of our government, its structure, and all those checks and balances that are supposed to keep any one branch from having too much power.
Lots to chew on there for sure about how power works in our government. And this fight's not over yet. How this all ends up could have a big impact on how the executive branch interacts with those agencies that are set up by Congress. We'll keep an eye on it and let you know what happens.